From the Kansas City Evening Star, November 21st, 1884, Emotional Insanity. Yesterday morning, the Evening Star man noticed a party of ladies and gentlemen entering the jail and learned that they were going in to save Bateman's soul. If possible, the reporter entered with them. The jail is a low, massive building of brick and stone, and the cells are entirely of stone and iron. Bateman occupies the corridor, which is simply a massive stone box about 6 feet wide and 15 long. As the ladies and gentlemen entered single file, the murderer stood in the door and shook each one cordially by the hand. They all greeted him affectionately as Oliver and treated him as a dear friend and brother. The ladies seated themselves on the benches, and the gentlemen remained standing. Bateman sat down with an air of resignation. The reporter remained near the door and did not take part in the exercises that followed. After singing a hymn and praying, the visitors began to get worked up in their work. The men shouted and cried, and the women became hysterical. Bateman was seized with an emotional fit of sobbing, and when one of the women got on her knees and fairly screamed for joy, crying, "Our Oliver is saved! Jesus is waiting for him with open arms," the brute crawled on his knees and howled, "I am saved! Jesus is waiting for me." Under the influence of the emotional insanity induced by the morbid excitement, one of the ladies got up, rushed to Oliver's side, threw herself on his knees, and actually put her arm around him. She remained in this disgusting position for half an hour, shouting and crying and thanking God for saving her dear Oliver. All the party then joined in, and the crying, praying, and singing was one confused uproar. Hundreds of people collected about the jail, for the prayers of the women could be heard a square. The more sensible citizens were disgusted and asked that the scene be brought to an end. While the Evening Star reporter, who was the only outsider in the corridor, was looking the disgust he felt, he got hit in the eye, metaphorically speaking himself. One of the old women turned while on her knees and shouted suddenly, "O Lord, there is one in our midst who is not saved, one who will feel the fires of eternal damnation, while Oliver is on the right hand of his Savior." This was a squelcher to the scribe, who at once assumed a more pious expression as a protection from further prayers in his behalf. Although their meetings have been held every day, this was the first occasion on which Oliver shed tears. The shouting about eternal fires and the everlasting damnation is calculated to frighten a man who is about to leap in the dark, but it does not convert him. His tears were simply the result of exacting emotion induced by his shaken nerves, rather than his blood-stained heart. After Oliver was saved and public disgust had subsided a little, it was learned that he had cursed the pious ladies and gentlemen roundly for their trouble after they left the cell. In the evening he was as profaned and jolly as ever, and treated his being saved as a good joke. An old gentleman who witnessed the scene through the barred windows was very indignant about the performance. He said, "Are our children to be taught that they can commit a brutal murder and be taken into eternal happiness just by acknowledging Jesus at the last moment? If Bateman don't go to hell, who will? What is hell for? The gates of the infernal regions had better be closed if such as that human butcher go to heaven. I think it is an outrage that such an emotional, sensational bosh can be tolerated. For my part, if Bateman goes to heaven, I will prefer hell in mine." The general impression here is that the people who shout and cry of Bateman do it more for the gratification of their morbid religious natures than for any benefit they expect the murderer to receive from it. The public demonstrations of disgust have been so strong that further efforts to save Bateman's bloody soul were abandoned, or at least toned down. If Bateman had stood in for eternal happiness, it is difficult to see where his punishment comes in. He heartily enjoyed his jail life, and the hanging was only pain for an instant. Still, these emotional men and women are happy in the thought that their Oliver will not be punished, that his sweet, innocent soul will be saved and live in eternal happiness on the right hand of the Savior. One glance at his confession will convince every thinking man or woman that where he goes, no human being with a heart and conscience could desire to go. Bateman was one of those moral abortions whose frightful disposition was beyond the comprehension of even the basest criminals. He could have no sense of pity for the weak, or he could not have coolly butchered the little creatures that he learned to confide in him, and who, in an event of danger, would have run to him for protection. His crime indicates that he was simply an inhuman monster, a beast without even the generosity of an animal, and his actions, while in jail, gave the people of Savannah no reason to think better of him. Such a creature is not a fit subject to be slobbered over and sent to heaven by people who would not place a premium on crime. It is fair to assume that dear Oliver is enjoying all sensations incident to a position in the choicest corner of Hades.